and produced by the Sound of Knowledge Incorporated.
Peter is with NIAP. We'll be doing a transition a little later on to some very, very interesting work that Peter is involved with. Just as some data points, what we would like to cover this afternoon with you is just a little bit about what this NIAP thing's all about, some of the partnership objectives. And I want to put the emphasis on partnership because the coming together of some NSA technical support and also some NIST technical support sort of breaks the mold. And what we found, strange enough, is that this mold works. This paradigm is actually a terrific way to do business. This isn't new. We're copying this paradigm from industry, which has been relatively successful with it over the many, many years. And we hope to continue to foster this partnership and foster it beyond just the NIAP and foster it beyond just the NSA and NIST. Actually begin to develop additional partnerships with other parts of government and perhaps more importantly with industry and folks such as yourself. We come together and we work on a common problem. We're going to be able to develop some common solutions, which probably most importantly are going to have a buy-in by the community. One of the things we found in this partnership type activity is that you do get a much better opportunity to go ahead and bring people into the process, make them part of the process if they wish to be part of the process, and in concert with that, develop some very interesting and unique deliverables, which we'll be sharing bits and pieces with you a little later on. Also, in this era of internationalism, it's the only way we can do business. And so for folks like NSA and NIST to say, whoa, let's go ahead and bury the hatchet, let's get together and let's see if we can solve some of these common problems was just a great, great move made by some people several years ago. Didn't want to belabor the point, but we wish to emphasize in this presentation that the way we're going to get from point A to point B is certainly going to be through partnerships, harmonization, and also sharing. Other things we'll be talking about are the projects that we have underway, also a little bit about mutual recognition. The mutual recognition is an international type activity that we're involved in, and also to share with you education, training, outreach programs, and also some work that Peter's been doing a little later in the presentation. This slide is, you've probably seen bits and pieces of this in about a half a dozen presentations that have been given to date. To date in this conference. The keynote speakers both mentioned the rapidly changing information technologies, compression of technology life cycles, and also a whole bunch of the other points that we have listed on this slide. Those of us that began our careers in information system security technology some 15 years ago didn't have to worry about some of these problems quite as much as you have to worry about them and we have to worry about them now. This whole business of product life cycles and also changing technologies has absolutely taken us old folk and just wrapped us right around the axle and thrown us right up into the ceiling and just smashed us dead. And we're hoping that the younger faces that we have in the audience are going to be able to grapple with some of those difficulties. Geez, product life cycle nowadays from almost from birth to death for certain types of these products is 18 months. Well, under the old security paradigm, 18 months was the amount of time it took us to think about whether or not we were going to even evaluate the product, much less bring it in, have it looked at, have it plugged into real live architectures, and then have something said about the security functionality of the assurance. So we are living in just we're living in this warp speed type environment, which is extremely difficult for us old folk go ahead and cope with under the old paradigm. So consequently, we are having to take a look at some new ways of doing business. I know that Marcus had mentioned in his presentation that this notion of test and test and test and also manage risk was very much a keynote. We at NIAP are taking that religiously, and we're trying to implement ways in which we can do this type of stuff much, much quicker, much faster, so that we can get results back to not only the users, the system engineers, but also to the product developers, those poor souls out there that are having to live in this type of a world. The growing complexity of IT products and systems. 7 years ago, 7 years ago, intrusion detection wasn't even on the radar screen. And now look, it's one of the key fundamental cornerstones of our whole technological solution sets. This is absolutely amazing that these sorts of things are happening, and the way in which they're happening is just, again, getting back to that warp speed, is providing us with opportunities, but also tremendous challenges. Go ahead and be able to solve some of these problems. Need for greater assurance in critical information structures. Need I say any more about that? Brian Snow got up and just beat us unmercifully about the head and shoulders as far as this assurance attribute. We at NIAP are trying to wrestle with ways in which to do that a little more creatively as well. So what's needed? For those of you that are following in your notes, I've rearranged some of these slides ever so slightly. What's needed? Producers of IT products need to have a better understanding of consumer information security requirements. Producers of IT products also have to be able to express what it is that they have in terms of functionality and assurance in languages that our system engineers can understand, as well as them knowing what the requirements are. Now, it's not a one-way street. On the other hand, us consumers of IT products need to have better ways in which to specify the desired security features and assurances, and also assess the security claims made by the producers. These are all cornerstones of trying to wrestle with this environment that we're in nowadays. So, NIAP came together again. It's a joint NIST NSA activity to meet some of those security testing needs for information technology, and also. And here on the slide it says long-term goal of NIAP is to increase the level of trust of customers. Certainly that is one of the long-term goals. But I'd like to also add that there's a whole bunch of short-term goals that this organization has identified. And one of those, and I consider it perhaps to be one of the most important, is champion the development and use of a national implementation standards for IT. In other words, in championing this international common criteria, and I'll be mentioning a few more words about that in just a few moments, what we're basically saying here is that if we're going to solve some of these problems, we're going to have to speak the same language. And this international common criteria language is one of the very few things that we've got on the radar screen right now that is going to help us be able to better communicate what it is that we need and also what it is that we have to offer. Terribly important. Support a framework for international recognition acceptance of IT security evaluation results. What we're basically saying here is that we no longer are just the United States of America. Most of commerce nowadays is internationalized. We're living in a global environment, and so consequently, these types of IT standards that we're taking a look have to be global in nature. They have to be accepted by other nations in this world in order for us to make this work. Facilitate the development and growth of commercial IT security testing in the industry within the U.S. This is one of the strategic goals that we have in place. And we're happy to say that we're working very hard to make this happen. That is, identify talented centers of excellence, invite them to get involved in this business of testing under the common criteria umbrella, and also be able to certify these laboratories as necessary and sufficient in terms of testing. Promote the development and use of evaluated IT products, and also foster development of IT security requirements, test methods, and techniques. We'll be sharing a little bit more of that in detail in just a few moments. The crowning glory of the NIAP is this slide that you see in front of you. NIAP several years ago was able to very successfully, along with other countries, 12 other countries to be precise, is to establish an international, an ISO standard 15408 called the Common Criteria. This Common Criteria is flexible. It's a list of functionality, security functionality, and it's also a list of assurances out there that we encourage people to use as part of that common language that we referenced a little earlier. In this particular paradigm, as a matter of fact, what's probably useful at this point in time is to give you an example of how this is being used successfully. And we won't pick on an example in the government, and we aren't even going to pick on an example we'll pick on an example in industry to show you how it's being used, and to show you that there is some harmony and some partnership that exists outside of just the government circles when it comes to the implementation and the use of this common language called Common Criteria. And the example that I want to share with you is the smart card activity that's being done by Visa MasterCard. This is terribly, terribly important work for them. They need a smart card, and they need that smart card that has lots of security functionality in it, because they can't stand to be producing one of these cards and have it hacked or have it fail. And so there is a fair amount of security, again, functionality. And I might also add that there's probably even more emphasis on the assurance side of the equation. Now, for those of you that are piqued, this protection profile that Visa MasterCard has produced cooperatively is available off the NIAP website and also onto the Smart Card forum. We'll share some of those URLs a little later on. But it's a terribly important piece of work that's being done. And it was interesting when Visa MasterCard started to take a look at ways in which to describe the type of security functionality they needed. They chose this common criteria as the standard language for expressing those requirements. A protection profile is a consumer-driven security requirement in specific information technology areas. I just needed to share that thought with you. Now, what happens is that once that protection profile is developed, and again, let's talk about the Visa MasterCard paradigm. Once that's developed and once that's validated by the developers of that protection profile, once those people are happy with that protection profile, it's at that point in time that it's provided to product developers. Now, this is the way that the paradigm is supposed to work. We are supposed to, as consumers of information assurance technology, be so smart as to be able to predict exactly what it is that we need. And in the case of the Visa MasterCard example, yes, that was indeed the case. But in a lot of the other technologies that we're dealing with, like firewalls and intrusion detections, detection mechanisms, that isn't so crystal clear. And so what often happens is that you will get some product developers that have some very innovative solutions out there that will develop these protection profiles a priori. And then, after the protection profile is validated in some way, shape, or form, and provided to product developers. It's at that point in time that the product developer then describes the security functionality and the assurance in terms of the security target that is on the right side of your screen. Security targets are nothing more than vendor statements of security claims for IT, whereas the protection profile are requirements that a user has specified. Once the security targets are developed, it's at that point in time that they're ready for prime time. That is evaluation by commercial laboratories. Now, under the scheme that we have here in the United States, these laboratories are assessed and evaluated, and they're private sector laboratories. The government has taken the stand at this point in time that there will be no government laboratories that will be doing testing on products under the U.S. scheme. That doesn't mean that there aren't government testing facilities out there, but those test results will not be codified in terms of a validated test report. The government will take those, will encourage that the products that they intend to use be evaluated by these endorsed commercial laboratories. Once the product goes through the common criteria testing laboratory, the results are validated by NIAP, and a common criteria certificate is issued, and it's posted on websites. I just wanted to mention, under the scheme, one of the other activities that NIAP was responsible for was to develop some tools that would make the job of developing either a protection profile or a security target a little easier. And there is an automated tool that's available off the NIAP web page that you can download to go ahead and make that job just a tiny bit more easy. Not to say that all the gray matter is out the window on this. Absolutely not, because these things, both the protection profiles and the security targets, are not easy things to put together. But once put together and once validated, they do provide a referenced roadmap, a direction for travel. Some of what Peter is going to be sharing with us fits very nicely into some of these automated tools. And for those of you that have innovative ideas as to how to make this profiling and also the security target activity a little easier, we would ask that you get in contact, drop us a note, because to make the process easier, to make it so that we can get these products evaluated quicker, more accurately, is one of the major goals of the NIAP organization. Just a couple words about mutual recognition. Mutual recognition is, again, one of those international cornerstones. NIAP came together with the State Department and negotiated a common criteria recognition arrangement that basically involves 12 nations. And these 12 nations have come together and said that they would be willing to mutually recognize products that were evaluated by these various countries that do evaluations. This was a major step in globalizing the common criteria. It was a mandatory absolute step that had to be taken. It was a tough road to hoe, because these countries have different philosophies about how to go about evaluations, how to go about certifying their laboratories, and how to go about certifying the products that come into these laboratories. It was a monumental amount of work, and the people that were able to pull this thing off deserve a great round of applause. Education and training, not to leave everybody in the lurch, but there is education and training available to go ahead and support much of what has been discussed. International, excuse me, we had our first International Common Criteria Conference several months ago, and we, like Black Hat, had to stop subscription to the conference almost 2 weeks before the conference was held. We were oversubscribed with no more room at the inn, basically. Protection profile development classes, common evaluation methodology classes, and also validation schemes and technical workshops are all cornerstones of this NIAP program. Also, an information assurance workshop is scheduled to be hosted. Information assurance is one of these, well, it's scheduled to be, we're looking at a January date for that information assurance workshop. Excuse me, NIAP 2000 projects. The cornerstone of our projects, of course, is the Common Criteria Evaluation and Validation Scheme. A great deal of the money that goes into NIAP supports this validation scheme, and basically that's where these laboratories are evaluated and certified to do common criteria testing. It's a fair amount of money that goes into the process. It is not an easy task. These laboratories have to go through a proficiency test. They have to be reviewed under other ISO standards, ISO standard 9000. The NIST is a very active component under the NVLAP, which is a volunteer program, a volunteer laboratory testing program, is a very active component in getting these laboratories assessed and evaluated. And very shortly, we should have 5 of the laboratories evaluated and certified. We're looking forward to those activities. Other types of other projects that we're involved in: cryptographic module protection development, healthcare security forum, a terribly important activity in the sense that healthcare now is starting to raise its ugly head when it comes to this information assurance and also computer security. In those forums, excuse me, in the healthcare forum, it is now mandatory that these systems, these healthcare systems, have some security associated with them. And so there was a forum developed in order to help healthcare take a look at the security functionality and assurances that they would need in order to comply with the with some of the laws that are coming on the books. Yes. Yes, directly related to HIPAA. Yes. The healthcare smart card, we've already talked about the smart card activity. There is a smart card forum, and it's through that smart card forum that the common criteria is being promulgated into that community. Telecommunications is another one of the areas that we're spending some effort and some time and some money. Common criteria toolbox, that's that automated tool that we have available. We're in the process of improving on that automated tool, make it easier for people to use that common criteria. Automated security testing, there's a very interesting activity that's ongoing, sponsored out of NIST, in which what we're looking at are some ways in which to do security testing to a much more granular level, number one, and number two, much, much quicker. Paradigm we're looking for is, if anyone has a tool out there that can do technical security testing very quickly and also very accurately, and to different types of levels of granularity, we're interested in talking with you. Infosec assessment program. The Infosec assessment program is defined here is some ongoing work in which what the project manager has been tasked to do is to take a look at ways in which to do certification and accreditation and map certification and accreditation with some of the ongoing initiatives in this common criteria arena. Now, for those of you that are not in the government or part of the Department of Defense, certification and accreditation is a very important activity that's done in that forum. Basically, it's a good housekeeping seal of approval that basically allows a commander or an office to go ahead and turn systems on. It's a very detailed analysis, and it goes beyond just the use of evaluated products. This type of activity is relatively granular and detailed. Yes. I'm sorry.
Are you referring to the spot?
No, not to spot. Separate. Government activities are required to, many government activities, government organizations are required to do certification accreditation activities. And this is what we're referring to. There's some NIAP activity that's being sponsored to support that type of granularity. Security and open source software. Need I say more? This is a very difficult problem to solve, and NIAP has decided to take a look at some activity in order to support the open source security. And threat and vulnerability research. And at this point in time, what I'd like to do is sort of break my monotony and go ahead and turn the program over to Peter. This is an attempt to show a little bit of this harmony that we've been prophesizing up here. So Peter, if you could.
Let's see, are we working here? Well, it's a dark room. You've had lunch. We had chocolate mousse, which went right down here and made me fall asleep. So let me, well, first off, NIAP's a huge project. We're going to look at a very small piece of it, but I think an exciting piece. So let's see, where shall I begin? Let me begin by telling you one of the most exciting things happening in security right now. It hasn't been mentioned at this conference, but it's very important, and that is called CVE. I can say it's the most exciting thing in security because I'm not part of it. Okay, so I'm not advertising myself. CVE, it's the Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures List. It's a project started out of MITRE. It has gotten industry buy-in from Cisco and ISS and Security Focus and T-Bugtrack, among 15 other vendors in academic and government places. It's a big deal. What is it? CV is very simple. Let's come up with a single name for every vulnerability in existence. Let's make sure there's no duplicates on that list. Okay? Very simple, but imagine what you can do now. You can take intrusion detection systems, and you can compare apples to apples. What do they detect? A lot of vendors advertise that, hey, there's 10 attacks, and those 10 attacks are really just subclasses of one attack another vendor detects. Suddenly you can compare these systems. When you have your vulnerability scanner, and it detects a vulnerability, it gives you a standard name. You can use that name and go to any resource from any company, look up that vulnerability and find out about it, find out how to solve it. It's a very simple thing, but CVE is creating interoperability. It's such a simple thing, people don't even want to talk about it in some circles, but it's truly revolutionizing how we work together. My project is basing on that. Here's what we do. Let's see, shall I start with the deliverables? Let's see, first what I've done. The project's called Ikat, the Ikat Metabase. It is a searchable vulnerability index. We're not a database, we're an index. At a fine granularity, you can search for the vulnerabilities that you want to find. Okay, I'll tell you what fine means in just a second. Once you find a vulnerability, we give you a snapshot of it. Just enough to let you know, is this vulnerability something I need? If it is, we link you out to publicly available vulnerability databases. So you can use, such as, we often link to Security Focus, we link to ISS, we link to CERT, link to T-Bugtrack. The idea is a single search engine to help you find the vulnerabilities you want, and then we link you out to the patch information. You can solve the problem, we link you out to the vulnerability databases, you find out more about the vulnerability. By fine-grained, what do I mean? You can search on vendor name, you can search on product names, version numbers, you can search on, does the vulnerability allow remote or local attacks? Is it a buffer overflow, a race condition, exception handling error? Any sort of characteristics, the consequences of the vulnerability. Does it give somebody root? Does it deny availability, integrity, confidentiality, all those kind of things. That's what I mean by fine-grained search engine. And what can you do with this? Okay, there's a lot of things you can do with this. You can take a system, take a critical system, take the software on that system, input the software name and version number into our tool, okay, you can come up with the vulnerabilities that are known to exist in that software, and you get links to patch information. Okay, you can use it that way. Yes?
Is this just operating system or are there applications also?
These are applications. Let's see. We have around 1,000 products listed in there. I'm not sure how many vendor names we have in there. And when I get to the third bullet, I'll give you like exactly where we are in the progress. So this is what you can do. You can your computer's been compromised. You want to know how they got in. You can come up with a list of vulnerabilities that existed in that computer to figure out how they could have gotten in and what damage they could have done. I talked to one vendor yesterday, and they're a small security company selling security software. And they said, why in the world are we writing vulnerability entries to give to our customers when all we have to do is output standard names and our customers can go to the real sources for the vulnerability information and get it done a lot better, and the company can do it a lot cheaper that way. So that's another way this engine can be used. Your IDS outputs a vulnerability, you go to our tool, you type in the standard name, and poof, you've got links to all the information you need. Okay, so where are we? This project was started amazingly in December. Time has flown. We are now caught up with the CVE vulnerability naming standard. This standard is a set of vulnerabilities approved by mainly security companies. There are some industry, academia, government members of that committee. Anyway, I won't go to the details of the naming standard. But you know the SANS top 10, right? You got 10. Do you think that covers the space? No? Do you think the CERT advisories cover the space of the important vulnerabilities out there? No? Okay, you're right. So what we have here, currently we have the 815 top vulnerabilities as decreed by Security Company Committee. We're also adding in candidates. So we're going to add in 700 candidates. These haven't been approved yet by the board, but are more timely, the things that have just come out. So we're well on our way. And we've gotten lots of support. NIAP has agreed to help support this. We've gotten support from one educational institution, which I shouldn't mention yet, and other places. So anyway, it's going well. Yes?
Is your site there accessible to non-military organizations?
This site is open to the world. The purpose of this site is not to link you to exploit information. So we don't think it's very useful to hackers. The site links you to patch information, general information. I can't deny that occasionally there might be indirectly an exploit somewhere in there, but that's not primarily the usefulness of it. And so I don't think this is the hacker place to go. Now, it's up, it's running, you can access it now. We're redoing the search engine so that you have a drop-down list of vendors, you choose a vendor, you have a drop-down list of that vendor's products, you choose a product, you have a drop-down list of vulnerable version numbers, you choose a version number, and poof, you have the vulnerabilities. That should be done this week. If it's not, I'll go back to work and encourage people, and it will be done next week. We have all the data. It's all up there. With the current version now, you can type in product names and version numbers manually in a text box, and you get the results. There's the address, csrc.nist.gov/ICAT. And I think it's really, well, I created it, so obviously I'm excited, but I think it's really exciting to have a common publicly owned search engine for these vulnerabilities. If you go to the vendors, you can search their database, but you can only search their information. What if they don't have the vulnerability? What if it's not at the granularity that you want to look at it? Sometimes you want to look at a CERT advisory. Sometimes you want to look at a detailed bug track listing, okay? So I really think we need a community indexing scheme. Amazingly, this is incredibly cheap to keep going. It only takes us about 15 minutes per vulnerability to stick this in there. So I see no reason why we won't be keeping up to date, and I encourage you to use it, and let's see. Yeah, and just tell your friends about it. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Terry, can I take questions? Or
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yes. CVE is public, cve.miter.org. The CVE list is public. There are CVE candidates that have not yet been approved by the committee. Then there are CVE entries that have been approved. We are currently up to date with all the approved entries. The candidate entries on average live a couple months before they become official entries. If you look at the SANS top 10 list, none of those are recently discovered vulnerabilities. The real bad ones are the ones that have been around for a while. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are obviously some new really bad ones. We've gotten resources, or we've got commitments for people to do the candidates. The exciting thing about that is that the vendors, like ISS for example, when they discovered a new vulnerability recently, they made it a candidate on this standard simultaneously to announcing it to the public. So the candidate list will be very timely. It will be up to date, and it shouldn't take us, very long to cover the candidates.
What's that URL?
Oh, the MITRE URL. It's you can go to my website and click on the CVE button. That's easy. There was a couple other questions.
We've seen several cases of vulnerabilities that have been both fixed by vendors and in fact been not fixed. And I'm really curious on how long it takes for this process that you talk about for having a committee to review a vulnerability and for a vendor to say that it's really fixed, and who verifies these things?
Well, this naming scheme has nothing to do with verifying fixes. No, the databases we link to, the public vulnerability databases, they have varying degrees of verification that they do when they tell you how to patch the problem. We are an indexing scheme. How long? Essentially, the candidates on CVE are very quick. There's a technical people that look at it and say, yeah, we think this is right. They're wrong about 10% of the time. The committee works that out. The committee is to formalize what the techies already said is true. Yes?
Do you have detailed information in your index, or do you pretty much link vulnerability details to the other public repositories that we have?
We contain the information you need to search. So remember all those search criteria I told you about? We have that information on the vulnerability. But we don't have, we just have a one-line description, for example. We don't have pages of textual description. We don't tell you how to patch it. So we're not a database. And that's important because we're not competing with the commercial databases. I've talked to, I can tell you, I talked to the CTO of Security Focus, and he was excited about this because we're driving traffic to him. We're not competing. We're driving traffic to him. So I think the model is a workable one because government shouldn't be trying to compete with industry. Yes?
At one time, going back to the granularities of the region, at one time you could go to, I think it's Security Focus in 100 Solaris 2.51, and I did a show rep-me, I did for in all the patches that I've gone into a single text field. Are you going to have that kind of granularity on your site where I can enter all my patch levels and say, okay, well, you've got this plus all these patches, so you're not vulnerable to these, but you still might be vulnerable.
That's not in the near future, no. Yeah. Anything else? Yes? What does ICAT stand for? Yeah, it's always the question. First off, I love cats. So if you go to the website, we have cats there. And it doesn't stand for anything. It's ICAT. It used to stand for something, if you're interested. I used to index exploit scripts. And it used to be an acronym for indexing attack scripts, but we had to throw that away because the government wouldn't let me give it away. So you understand. I should give it back to Terry. I think we're probably low on time.
I'll tell you what really makes this job fun for myself is to get people like Peter up here, go ahead and talk about some of the innovative things that are being done out there. And I want you to give this guy a round of applause. And next year, we hope to see a few more of you up here coming up with some innovative solution sets to solving some of our tougher problems. And these are some of the program areas. And I'm throwing this up here just sort of as a reminder that this is where NIAP is spending a great deal of its time. And when we get people like Peter come up here, go ahead and talk about some of these innovative solution sets. And perhaps even more importantly, go ahead and get some of us old guys fired back up again. It just makes it a whole heck of a lot of fun doing this sort of thing. I believe that is, well, we have a summary slide. And that's for what it's worth. Y'all have been just an absolutely great audience, and we thank you for your time, and we'd be happy to go ahead and take questions after we go ahead and break the formal program. Thanks much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.